Welcome back to another episode of Peeping Ballers. Guys, this is a video I really didn't want to make, but today we're going to discuss whether Kim Min-jae's career is in jeopardy due to his Achilles tendonitis. But before we progress into the video, if you like all things Asian Korean football, but also Bundesliga football, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll have all the latest in club and international ball for you here on Peeping Ballers, especially as we ramp up to the 2026 World Cup. If you haven't been following Korean football and also Bayern Munich, you might not know that center back Kim Min-jae is a rock for not just his club, but also his country. He is one of the best Asian center backs of all time, winning Defender of the Year awards in Napoli in the Serie A, winning the Scudetto for the city of Napoli, then moving to Bayern Munich under Thomas Tuchel back in 2023. And for his past 2 years in Bayern, he hasn't been playing at his best. Definitely have not seen the same defender that we witnessed in Italy. Unfortunately, getting lots of racial abuse as well for his on-the-field performances. But there's been recent news coming out of Korea that kind of indicates there might be a reason for a dip in his performance quality. According to his representatives, Kim Min-jae has been dealing with an Achilles tendon issue since around October, November of 2023, right around the Asian Cup. Now, ever since the Asian Cup, Kim Min-jae has barely gotten any rest. He's been playing usually full 90-minute matches for both club and country. Guys, I saw this crazy stat from the International Federation of Professional Footballers, or FIFPro, that basically sheds light on how dire Kim Min-jae's situation is this year. So he's dealing with Achilles pain, but he's also having to travel over 74,000 kilometers and playing in 70-plus matches. The man has literally made 20 international trips this past season, covering almost twice the Earth's circumference. And before this latest news came that he was dealing with this Achilles tendon issue, he was supposed to play in the Club World Cup in the US this summer for Bayern Munich. But due to his Achilles tendonitis getting worse, he's not going to play for Bayern for actually a few months at the very least. Doctors have recommended that he actually stay away from training in general and just make sure that his legs feel normal again. Now, the original report was that he had Achilles tendonitis in one leg, but he's been playing so much and getting no rest this past season that the Achilles tendonitis has actually spread to his other leg, which means both his legs are affected. Kind of explains the dip in performances, why he hasn't looked as sharp for Bayern. Again, you can blame the Bayern board, I think, for not investing in the center back depth. Upamecano and Kim Min-jae were basically the only two playable center backs in Vincent Kompany's system. You couldn't really rely on Eric Dyer because he's not fast enough to play Kompany's high line. And then we all know Hiroki Ito is the gingerbread man and breaks his foot basically every other game. Look at the Bayern board, but also you have to look at Vincent Kompany. I really think, guys, he really didn't deserve this Bayern job after getting relegated from Burnley. He wasn't ready for it, and I think it showed in his usage of players. Barely giving Kim Min-jae any rest. I get you're a young manager and you need to win, but it should not come at the cost of your players' long-term health. Winning is important, but also, your players as human beings. You want Kim Min-jae to have a nice quality of life when he's older, and running him into the ground the way Vincent Kompany did this season is not conducive to that. And I personally fear the damage that Kim Min-jae has done to his body this year and that it might be, irreversible. For those who don't know, Kim Min-jae is a player who's had lots of injury issues in his past. Back in 2018, when he was around 21, 22, he was supposed to play at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. He missed that tournament due to a fibula injury he sustained. And then you fast forward to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. He actually would have missed that tournament had it been a regular World Cup taking place in the summer. He was dealing with an injury in his leg again around that time. But luckily, as we all know, that World Cup was postponed to the winter because of the unbearable summer conditions in the Middle East. But nonetheless, my point stands that had the 2022 World Cup been during the summer, Min-jae would have missed 2 consecutive World Cups. Now you're heading into this 2025-2026 season, which is a World Cup year. And you worry because, the player obviously probably wants to play as many minutes as he can so he can stay sharp for the World Cup. But at the same time, he's dealing with Achilles tendonitis in both his legs, which means that it's an injury he has to manage very carefully. So I'm not a doctor, but from what I recall reading is that tendonitis, especially in your Achilles, is manageable if you receive the proper treatment. However, if you leave it untreated, this condition can lead to many other complications that not only make your injury worse, but cause permanent damage to your tendons. And honestly, given the workload that Kim Min-jae has had this past year and the lack of rest Vincent Kompany gave him, I can't help but imagine that he did a lot of permanent damage to his body already. And keep in mind, like I said, it's a body that's been already through a lot of injuries. As a lifelong Bayern fan myself, I was so excited to see a player of Min-jae's caliber sign for Bayern Munich. We've had, I think, another Korean player play for Bayern in the past, Chung Woo-young, but he barely played at all when he was with the club. So to see a Korean player, become a mainstay of my favorite club was so exciting. But to see kind of the vicious racist attacks that Min-jae endured, especially this year, was really sad to see. And even more so now because we were learning that maybe his performance this season was really impacted by the Achilles tendonitis that he was dealing with. His agents have been making the rounds in Korean media saying that, yeah, the pain was so bad that Min-jae actually had to just push through, just using a sheer guts and adrenaline, that he wasn't really able to jump properly because the pain was so severe. And it just makes you wonder who was looking out for this player's best interest. And you can see why Hong Myung-bo a few months ago actually slammed Bayern Munich for the way they handled Kim Min-jae's injury and said they basically weren't protecting the player. And in this, case, Hong Myung-bo is right. I don't rate him as a manager, but he was right about the way Bayern wasn't protecting Kim Min-jae. But at the same time, I think the KFA and Hong Myung-bo himself have a lot of blame in this issue because they are the ones who also kept calling up for international windows and playing him full 90 minutes against, lesser Asian teams that we should have beaten without him. So the situation in general is a complete mess. And you just worry about, not just Kim Min-jae's career, but also his quality of life after football. A lot of footballers sustain some pretty serious injuries during their playing career that also affects, the way they live afterwards. Shoving aside, Kim Min-jae's personal issues as well due to this, you have an upcoming World Cup where it seems like the Korean national team and our kind of important players like Min-jae are not in good places. Min-jae's hurt, kind of losing a spot at Bayern right now. Lee Gang-in isn't really playing much at PSG, even though they're in the Champions League final. And then you have Son Heung-min, who won a Europa League, but didn't really look very Son Heung-min-ish in the final, and maybe is starting to show his age. So it's not a good time to be a fan of Korean football right now. I think, obviously, things in the sport can change very quickly. But this Kim Min-jae situation in general is kind of a stark reminder of the dark times we're going through in Korean football, especially, with the incompetence of the KFA and Hong Myung-bo. So the only thing we can really hope for is that Kim Min-jae does take the time he needs to recover. Like I mentioned, he's not going to be playing at all in the Club World Cup. He's going to take at least a few months off just to see how his body reacts. And I honestly think there's a good chance that he is not ready in time for the start of the Bundesliga campaign. Bayern Munich recently did sign Jonathan Tah from Bayer Leverkusen, who is a decent defender for the German national team, and I think played his best football in a back three. Yet to see how well he'll do in a back four, especially in a high-pressing back four that Vincent Kompany likes to use. But nevertheless, even though it's competition for Min-jae, I think it's good to have more center-back depth, especially because last season there really wasn't any depth, and hopefully it forces Kompany to give Min-jae some rest when he's healthy and returns to his best. I'm trying to, kind of look at this from a positive perspective as well. If Min-jae can recover and he's given the time he needs, I think having Jonathan Tah as another option is good for him because when he needs rest, he can just rest instead of, Kompany being hesitant to play someone like Dyer. And hopefully Bayern Munich have learned a lesson from this whole debacle and realize that you just can't tax your player's body this much, no matter how badly you want to win. Because at the end of the day, these players are human beings. And the problem in world football has been this crazy packed schedule where not just FIFA, but also the clubs are getting greedy and wanting to make more money from these crazy fixture schedules. It's a sad lesson, and again, we don't want to speculate too much because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I really hope that this is not the beginning of the end for Kim Min-jae, especially because, he is turning 29 later this year. It's not exactly an old age, but he's not 21 anymore, so he really does have to, worry about his long-term health. And I honestly think that given his personality, but also the stuff he's been through, that there's a chance we could see Kim Min-jae retire from the Korean national team after the 2027 Asian Cup. He'll be around 31 then, which isn't an unnatural age for people to retire from international duty. And if we as fans want him to keep playing beyond that, then we have to really hope that he gets enough rest, but that also he's treated properly by Kompany at Bayern for this upcoming season, and that also the fans just give him more support because it has been disappointing, like I said, seeing some of the racial epithets, some of the racial slurs that have been hurled in Min-jae's direction, and a lot of that is so unwarranted because he's a warrior and he's been playing on one leg this whole season. So we just really hope that he comes back to his best form and that he's also just happier because he's been through a lot as well off the pitch, I think, in his personal life. Won't really get into that. You can look that up for yourselves later. But I think that in the end, this is just a stark lesson on how we also need to, treat these players as human beings and not just products that perform for us whenever we want. And we wish Kim Min-jae nothing but the best as he returns to his full health.